Hello and welcome to the Core Python course by Mission AI. So in the previous videos, I've already covered modules 1 and 2. So we've understood the basic data types, we understood variables, we've understood arithmetic, comparison, as well as logical operators, and we've also seen how to convert basic data types to other basic data types, right? So we're now going to move to module 3, right, which is Python collections, right? And again, this is the missionai.org website, and this is the core Python course page, right? So I had posted a course update in this video. You can check that out. All our course material is available on GitHub. I have that repository open right now, and it's under this course one core Python programming folder. You'll see that there's a module 3 that's been updated. So that's the file you can download, and I've already shown you how to download it in the previous videos, so you can take a look at that. So this is the file we'll use to get started. I've already got it onto my local system, and that's what I'll be using. So you can go ahead and get it onto your system and then follow along. Okay, so let's get started. This is the file that I'm going to open. It's just opening up. And here we go, right? So this is a fairly long file, but uh, it's assume that this is probably the most important module in the entire course, right? These are the data types that we will be dealing with most often as we progress further through the machine learning full stack, right? Uh, so when I say collection, as the name suggests, I mean like a collection of elements or a collection of items, right? Now, some of these data types are just collections that are unordered, that is, there is no sequence. Some of these are collections that are ordered. That is, the order of the elements matters, and hence they're a sequence, right? So I'm going to cover 5 collections in this, and these are the 5 collections that the Python programming language has. There's string, list, dictionary, tuple, and set. Okay. In this video, I'm going to look at string, and in the subsequent videos, we look at the other 4. Now, let's get started with the string data type. Now, you can also treat string as a basic data type, but string also has a lot of additional properties and methods that make it more similar to lists. So I decided to treat string as a collection rather than as a basic data type, but I'll cover the entire gamut of things that are possible with strings. So the string data type basically holds text data, right? And when you think of all the other programming languages, we think of characters, string, text, all these different things, right? So string is basically a sequence of characters, right? Now, Python doesn't have a separate character data type. So even if you have a single character, it's treated as a string of length 1, right? And remember one very important thing: strings are immutable. Okay, I had spoken about the concept of immutability in module 2. You can check it out there. But strings are basically immutable. It means once you cannot alter the state of a string. That's once it's created with a certain value, it continues to have that value, and that value cannot be changed. So the first thing is, how do you create a string, right? It's basically initializing. So let's look at a few examples here, and then we'll get to writing our own code, right? Now, typically the way to declare a string variable is some content. It could be characters, numbers, whatever, enclosed by quotes. And it could either be single quotes or double quotes, right? So in this particular case, we can initialize the string using single quotes, right? And in this case, we will initialize the string using double quotes, right? And they both mean the exact same thing. There's no difference. Like what you use to enclose the string makes no difference at all. It's the same content, right? So if we were to compare these two values, they would be equal, because if you remember this equal to operator, this comparison operator, we're testing for value. We're not testing if they point to the same object. We're just checking if string 1 has the same value as string 2, and that will return true. Now, Basically, strings are used to store text data, right? Now, what happens if your text contains an apostrophe? Like in English, an apostrophe basically is used to denote possession, right? For example, uh, Mission AI's course on core Python programming, or uh, the working professionals work bag, or the company's property. So basically, the apostrophe s denotes some kind of possession, right? And what happens if you need to include that in a string, right? So if you use single quotes to enclose the string, then that apostrophe single quote will interfere with the string and it'll throw an error, right? So let me just run what we've spoken about so far, and then I can, I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to create a new cell here. And the way you can do that is just click on insert and cell below, right? So I initialized, let me just paste these things one by one, right? So I'm just going to cut this. So first I initialized this string and I run it using control enter. Then I initialize the second string and I run this cell using control enter. And you can see that when I print them out, they're both the exact same thing, right? And let's confirm that using uh, this comparison operator, relational operator. So print string 1 equals string 2. Also print string 1 not equal to string 2. And that should basically give you false. And here you remember I told you that Python uh, variables are basically case sensitive variable names, right? So I had put capital S here. So remove that and make it small s, right? Otherwise it'll throw an error. So let's run this now using control enter. You can see that the statement saying that these two string values are equal returns true, and the statement saying that they are not equal returns false. So basically, irrespective of whether you use a single quote or a double quote to construct or initialize your string, the value of the string stays the same. Okay. Now we had gotten to the part where we were considering what happens if there's an apostrophe, like basically denoted by a single quote within the content of the string, right? So in this case, for example, Python strings are used to store text data, right? You can see this particular character here, which is a single quote, right? Now let's see what happens if if I had initialized this string using a single quote instead of a double quote. You can see that the initial part of the string is yellow, and then when it encounters the second single quote, it closes the string, right? And everything after that is considered to be not part of the string. So if I were to run this, it'll throw an error saying invalid syntax. That's basically saying that the interpreter cannot understand what I've written, right? Like I was actually meaning to include this entire thing in the string, but because the single quote was here, it caused an error. So if there is a single quote within the string, simple solution is use double quotes to create the string, right? So instead of that single quote, let me just create using double quotes. And now let me print that string. Now you can see that it runs fine and this single quote shows up correctly in the content of the string, right? So basically you can use either single or double quotes to initialize a string. And if the string contains an apostrophe, then use double quotes on the side so that Python doesn't throw an error, right? Now let's look at another case. What happens if the string content contains a double quote? Like for example, there was this quote by Steve Jobs, right? Saying, "Stay hungry, stay foolish." So, uh, what if my sentence said, "Steve Jobs had a famous quote," and in double quotes, "Stay hungry, stay foolish," right? Then again, just like in the case of the single quote, if you use double quotes to initialize the string, then there will be a conflict and the string gets terminated early and everything after the first double quote gets treated as garbage, right? Python doesn't know what to do with it. So for example, if I were to look at this statement, he said, please give me my phone back. Right? Now, please give me my phone back is in double quotes. So what do I use here to make sure that there is no conflict? Let me just run it here and show you what happens if I use double quotes. Right? You can see that this is what Python considers to be the string, the part in yellow. And all this, it doesn't know what to do with because the string has already been terminated over here with that first double quote, right? So when you have this problem, like for example, there are double quotes within the content of the string, then you use single quotes to initialize the string, right? Because we already realized in the beginning that irrespective of whether you use a single quote or you use a double quote to initialize, like to enclose the string, the value is the exact same, right? So now if I run it, it runs correctly, right? So let me just also make this one change here that I had. Yeah, cool. So again, single, double quotes both lead to the same string. Uh, if the string contains an apostrophe, then use double quotes to initialize. If the string contains double quotes, then use single quotes outside to enclose the string, right? Now, let's look at another case. What happens if we have multi-line text, right? Like in this case, it's spread over two lines. So there is a line, then there is a new line character which pushes text to the next line, and then there is the second line, right? So the way to handle multi-line pieces of data, for example, a paragraph with multiple lines, the way you handle that is using triple quotes, right? And when I say triple quotes, it could be the either triple single quotes to start the string and triple single quotes to end it, or double single or triple, uh, basically three double quotes in the beginning and end, or three single quotes in the beginning and end. Okay. So here you can see that this is also another multi-line string that we initialize this way. In this case, we've used three single quotes. So let's show you how both these statements run. And I'll just cut out the second bit. So you can see that this is a piece of multi-line text data that is now the value that reflects in string 5, and it stretches over multiple lines. Okay, just remember one thing. Okay, when you're using this multi-line, this triple quote thing, everything that is between the triple quotes is included. Like after the triple quotes here, there is a new line character that pushes text to the next line, right? So that's also included over here. And after the second line, there's another new line character that pushes the triple quotes to the next line. That's also included below this. So if I didn't want those new line characters, then this is what I would do. I would push those double quotes, those triple quotes this way, right? So now if I print it, you'll see that there's no extra line above and below. And let me show you the same example using single quotes, triple single quotes. So if I run this now, you can see that this multi-line text has been saved in this string variable called string underscore 6. Okay, so that's basically it, for initializing strings. So the main concepts we need to remember here are single double quotes as enclosing, and you can use either interchangeably. So if you have complications like an apostrophe or double quotes within the text, you can adjust accordingly, right? And if you want multi-line text, use triple quotes to enclose the string. So let's do some exercises now. So the first exercise is initialize the following string. The company performed well in the last quarter. Will you use single or double quotes for this? And here you can see that there's no apostrophe, there is no double quotes in the sentence. So you can use either single or double and it's the exact same thing. So let me use double in this case and print S. So you can see that the value has been printed, right? And even if I used single quotes, the value would be the exact same. Here we go. Okay, so let's move on to the second exercise now. Initialize the following string. Apple's comparators include Samsung and Huawei, right? And what do we use, single quotes or double quotes, to initialize the string? So I just explained to you that if there is an apostrophe, then we cannot use single quotes because Python will treat that apostrophe as the ending of the string, right? So let's use double quotes instead, and now print s. Here, the string is just fine even though there is an apostrophe here because we use double quotes to enclose the string. Now if we use single quotes and copy this exact same thing over here, you can see that Python basically considered the part before the apostrophe as the content of the string, and once the single quote is encountered, everything after that it doesn't know what to do with, right? So we cannot use single quotes in this case. Let's move on to the third example now. He said, please come to work on time, right? Now in this case you can see that there are double quotes within the string. So let's not use double quotes to enclose the string. Instead we will use single quotes. S equals, he said please come to work on time. And now if I print S, you can see that these double quotes show up correctly the way they're supposed to. Okay. So if there's double inside, use single quotes outside. If there's single quote inside, use double quotes outside. And now we have a multi-line string, which is a paragraph basically, and we want to initialize it as a single string, right? So first what I'll do is I'll just uncomment these two lines by pressing Control /, and then I'll say S equals triple quotes, okay? And it doesn't matter if I use single or double because the content of the string itself is straightforward, and there's no apostrophe, there's no double quote, so I can use any of these. So now let me print and see what happens. So we have a multi-line string. Okay, so we basically created a multi-line string, right? Successfully using triple quotes. And in this case, it wouldn't have mattered if we had used single quotes or double quotes as the enclosing thing, for the simple reason that the string is not complicated. There are no apostrophes inside, there are no double quotes inside. So we can use either, right? And we can see the output here. So let's move on to the second part of this, which is called string escaping, right? Uh, so we've seen already like single, double quotes, and there are complications that arise depending on the contents of the string. Now, another way to deal with double quotes inside a string is to escape it, right? So basically, all we're saying is once the double quotes on the outside to enclose the string are different from the double quotes inside the string. So the double quotes inside the string, we escape it. That's basically telling Python, don't treat this like the end of the string. Treat it like it's the part of the string. Don't treat it like a special double quote. Treat it like a normal double quote that's part of text, right? So here, so double quote is basically the escaping, backslash is basically the escaping character. So if you look at this statement here, right? He said, give me my phone back. Now, this part here is in double quotes, right? Within the string. So according to my previous advice, we could have used single quotes at the end and that would have worked fine. But if we want to just use double quotes across the board, like we don't want to think so much, then the only way to do this is to use a backslash before this double quote to tell Python, hey, treat this double quote as part of the string. Don't treat it as some special character. And similarly, another backslash before the second double quote within the string. And then finally, this double quote over here to end the string, right? So basically, the double quotes inside would normally have terminated the string, but by using the backslash, we are telling Python to treat it as a character that is part of the string. So, so we have to look at basically special sequences, right? We know that backslash is the escaping character. So there are two sequences that have special meaning, right? So one is backslash n, which basically is the new line character, right? It's the equivalent of pressing enter. And backslash t is the tab character. It's the equivalent of pressing tab on your keyboard. So let's look at first, let's just copy and paste this above example here and let me run it. So you can see that the double quotes have come just fine, right? So moving on to the backslash n and backslash t, let's copy that and paste it in this cell over here. Basically says this is the first line, backslash n, this is the second line, backslash t that happens to contain a tab. So in the output that we see, we should see here onwards, basically after this backslash n on another line, because backslash n is a new line character. And over here, in place of the backslash t, we should see a tab, which is basically 4 or 8 spaces. Right? So let me run this. You can see that this is the first line is on top. Then there's a new line character that pushes the rest of the text to the second line. And in that second line, you have this is the second line. And then there is a tab over here, which is where we had our backslash t, right? That's here. That in this case is 4 spaces. So you understood what backslash n is, you understood what backslash t is, right? New line and tab respectively. So let's say you want a string that includes a backslash. Like for example, I don't want to escape anything, but I want to include a backslash itself in the string, the literal value backslash, right? So in that case, how do I do it? Simple, just escape that also, right? You escape a backslash, and how do you escape it? With another backslash. So look at this particular string. This is how to escape characters, right? So how would I escape double quotes? With a backslash. How do I escape backslashes? With a backslash. So in this case, I would have two backslashes in the string because the first, so basically what this is telling Python is escape this character which is backslash. So you get one in the output. And again, it's saying escape this next character which is backslash. So you get the second backslash. Over here, backslash t will give you the tab, backslash n will give you the new line, and then it prints the output. So let's copy that here and run it. So you can see this corresponds to this exactly, right? So we used backslash double quote. So this double quote was treated as a part of the string here as well as here. We used backslash backslash to indicate that we actually wanted the literal value included in the string. So we got two backslashes here by including 4 backslashes in the input. Then we have a tab over here, which was our backslash t. We have a new line over here, which pushed the rest of the output to another line, which was backslash n, right? So now you've seen how to escape special characters in a string. Typically, you will only escape double quotes. You will escape backslash, and you have backslash t and backslash n, which are special sequences. Now, what happens if you want the contents of the string to appear exactly as is, right? Like literal interpretation. So then you use the R character before initializing the string. So that basically means raw, right? It tells Python to treat the contents of the string as is without treating any backslash as a special escaping character. So let's now contrast this output with the previous output, right? So it's almost the same string. The only difference is I've got this R out in front. Let me run it using Control Enter. Here we go. You can see that here in the second output, everything has been treated literally by Python. That is, it's not treated anything as a special character, not given special meaning to anything. Whatever is within those double quotes, it's added as is. Like for example, here backslash double quote is treated as backslash double quote, right? Here backslash t is treated as backslash t, as a string literal, not as like some string with a special meaning. So that basically covers string escaping, which basically means if you want special characters in your string or you want special sequences, how do you do it, right? So the backslash is the most important thing to understand here. So let's do some exercises. Initialize the following string using string escaping. He said, please come to work on time. So I'm going to say S equals, he said, please come to work on time. And I'm going to use double quotes here across the board from now on. I'm not going to like figure out when to use single, when to use double, and so on. Now, how do I escape this? Backslash. How do I escape this? Backslash, right? So he said, please come to work on time. So whatever's part of the string, I have used backslash where appropriate. Now, if I print it, the string is shown correctly, right? So in this case, I used string escaping to declare the string. Now the next thing is initialize the following string with each sentence on a separate line using the new line character sequence. So let me just uncomment this using control slash. So I'll say s equal to, and let me put a double quote at the end also. And each sentence should be on a new line. Now, how do I do it without actually using triple quotes, right? So all I would do is I would put a backslash n over here, which is the new line sequence, right? New line uh, escape sequence. So then I print out the output. And you can see that the first line comes on line 1. The second line of text comes on line 2. That's because they're separated by a backslash n. Now initialize a string with the following 5 words, each separated by a tab. This is 5 words long. So let's say s equal to this, then backslash t, is, then backslash t, 5, then backslash t, words, backslash t, long, full stop, right? So basically each word here is separated by a tab. Now let me print this output, and you can see that we have the right output here. So in the previous example, we saw backslash n, which is the new line. In this example, we saw backslash t, which is tab. And in the first example, we saw backslash used to escape double quotes within the string. Now let's move on to the fourth exercise. Initialize the following string using string escaping. This is a double quote, this is a backslash, this is a new line character, and this is a tab, right? So I want to initialize this string. So let me just uncomment this first. I say s equal to double quote. Now, how do I make sure that I tell Python to treat this double quote here as part of the string? I escape it with a backslash. And this backslash, I want it to be treated literally. So I'll add another backslash. Now, I want the text backslash n literally here. I don't want it to be pushing the remaining text to a new line. So I'll escape this backslash as well. And finally, I'll escape the tab backslash as well. and then I'll close this string. Now if I print it, you can see that the literal values have been printed here to output. So the double quote, backslash, new line character, and tab all appear correctly. Now it says write the same initialization code as above, but this time put an R or R before, like capital R or small r before the string. Is the output any different? And according to me, it will be different because in the previous case, we were using backslash to basically uh, assign, basically escape these characters. In this case, R is telling Python to treat these characters exactly as is and not assign any special meanings. So here you can see that this output is different from this output. So that brings us to the end of string escaping, right? We've understood how to use backslash, backslash n, backslash t, and also the R before the string to denote a raw string, literal string. Now let's look at some basic string operations, right? The first thing is you can, and this is the most important one, you can concatenate two strings using the plus operator, right? Normally when you work on numeric variables, plus performs the addition. But when you use strings, plus concatenates the two strings. That is, it joins them together. Now you need to understand that it does not change either of the strings. Okay, it gives you a new string as the output. So I have hello and I have world, and if I say print hello plus world, it concatenates these two things together, right? And if in this particular case, it will say hello world space hello world. Let me just show you that. So my string 11 is hello, string 12 is world. So let me just comment out the second thing and print only the first thing. So you can see that it prints hello world, right? And obviously the space comes from here. Now, if I were to print this whole thing twice separated by a space, then this is what the output would be. Hello world space hello world. So you can concatenate any number of strings together and you can add spaces or whatever else you need, right? So the next thing is only string values can be concatenated, right? So you remember I told you in module 2 that Python has strong typing, which basically means that it's very clear about certain operations being available only to certain types of data, right? So concatenating a string to an integer makes no sense. Python will throw an error. So if, for example, I do string 11 plus 5, print that out, it should throw an error, right? Because string 11 is a string and 5 is an integer. And it's an incompatible operation. You can see that throws a type error. Now, the way I would actually make this work is by converting 5 to a string, right? To its string representation. So now I have string 11, which is hello, and string of 5, which is the string representation of the number 5. They're both strings, so the operation will be successful. You can see hello space 5. And finally, you can also use a multiplication operator on a string, and it repeats the string n number of times. How many ever times? If you do string multiplied by 5, it will repeat the string 5 times. Like for example, if I say print hello into 5, it will say hello 5 times, right? So we've seen using the plus operator to concatenate strings. We've seen how to convert from integer to string so that then we can perform concatenation. And finally, we've seen the multiplication operator, which repeats a string n times. Let's do these exercises now. Initialize three strings with the following contents. Python is awesome. And then print out the sentence Python is awesome using the above strings and the plus concatenation operator, right? Okay, so let's say S1 equals Python, S2 equals is, S3 equals awesome, right? So now there's two ways to do it. Like you remember we covered the print function in module 2. So one is you can just to bring in the spaces, you can just specify these three values with commas. So print S1, comma S2, comma S3 with the default separator being space. It'll print out Python is awesome, right? Or, but in this case, I want to use the plus concatenation operator. So what I'll do is I'll print S1 plus space plus S2 plus space plus S3, right? So I have Python space is space awesome. Now let me run that and you get the same output. So we've seen how to use a concatenation operator, not just with variables, but also with literal values. Like in this case, space is the value. Now create a variable x with value 10. This is the next exercise. X equals 10. Print out hello contestant number 10 using the variable x. So what we want to do is basically concatenate this string with the string representation of variable x. So we'll say print hello contestant number and concatenate with the string representation of variable x. So you have hello contestant number 10, which is exactly what we wanted. And finally, ask the user to input a word and the output should be the string. Here is the echo followed by this input word repeated thrice. So let's say word equals, and we covered the input function in module 2, word, right? So the user will now enter a word and that word you take and you print out this message. Print, here is the echo, space, and followed by the word repeated thrice. So plus word, and we already saw how to use the multiplication operator, right, for word repeated thrice. So let's say plus word into 3. What I could have also done was plus word plus word. This would have been the same thing. Let's say test, right? So it gives me test, test, test. I could have also done word into 3. Run the same thing and it gives me the same output, right? But let's say I also want a space in between these words. So we can also perform operations on this word and then multiply it 3 times. Word plus space into 3. So I should have a gap between each of those words. So now if I run it, it'll have test space test space test. So this is how you use the multiplication operator and also concatenation. So we've seen how to perform these basic string operations, right? Concatenation, converting to integer to string, and also multiplying or repeating a string n times. So we've seen initialization, we've seen string escaping, and we've seen simple string operations. Now let's move on to the part where this is the reason why a string is included as a collection, right? Where we treat strings as a sequence. So there's two main things we look at here. One is called indexing, which is you pick out a character at position n, right? So all you're doing is you're treating the string as a sequence of characters uh, each of them has a label for their position, right? So the first item in the string, that is the first character, has the index. This position is called the index, has an index of 0. The second character in the string has an index of 1, and so on. And the last character, let's say the string had 10 characters totally. So the last character would have an index of 10 minus 1, which is 9, right? So basically, if you have a string of length n, the index runs from 0 to n minus 1. Okay. And remember that in a string, we can access elements at different characters at different positions, but we cannot modify them because strings are immutable. So the process of accessing individual characters in a string is called indexing, right? And if you want like chunks of the string, like for example, the first three characters or the fifth to the 10th character, that is what you call subsetting or slicing, right? So we'll look at both indexing and slicing. So the first thing you need to understand is this thing called the len function. Okay. So len basically gives you the number of elements in a collection, right? And we'll use the same len function for lists, dictionaries, sets, tuples, and everything, right? So len basically gives you the number of elements in a collection. In this case, it gives us the length of the string. So len of hello world will give us 5 plus 1 plus 5 plus 1. That's 12. 12 should be the output because the length of that hello world string is 12, right? So if I run this, and let me just create a new cell here. So length of hello world should show us 12 because there are 12 characters in this string. Now, let me just create a string called sequence, right? And let me have the first 10 letters of the alphabet, the English alphabet, A to J. I'll initialize this. So now we're performing some indexing operations, right? We're basically getting a character at position n, whatever n might be. So let's get the first character. So to do that, we need to say sequence, which is the name of the string, then box bracket, open box bracket, square bracket basically, then 0, because we want the first character. And I told you that the index starts from 0. So 0 corresponds to the first character, 1 corresponds to the second character, and so on, right? So sequence in box bracket 0 will give us the character from the sequence string at index 0. That's what this means. Okay. So if I run it, I get A, right? A is the first character in the string, which is basically at index 0. So let me just get a few of these here. So we've already seen how to get the first character, right? So it's string of 0. Now, how do we get the sixth character? So we know that the character at a certain position corresponds to the index at position n minus 1, right? So basically, the sixth character would be index position 5. So we say sequence of 5 to get the sixth character, which in the English alphabet is F. And you can see that we've got F over here, right? Now, how do we get the last character of the string? So logically speaking, let me just, what do we get when we say len of sequence? We get the length of the string, correct? Which is 10, right? So if you want the position of like the last character, the index of the last character, it'll be len of sequence minus 1, right? Which is 9. So the character at index 9 is the 10th character, which is the last character in the string. And To get that character at that index position, we say sequence of and get this, right? So the character at position, that index position 9, that is the 10th position in the string, is j. So that's how you get this, right? But it's complicated to put in brackets len of sequence minus 1. It's, I mean, it's just unnecessary, right? So there should be an easier way of doing it. So let's find that easier way of doing it. All you need to say is string of minus 1. Sequence is the name of the string, open box brackets, minus 1. This is called negative indexing, right? So it starts from the back. So minus 1 gives you the last character, minus 2 gives you the second last character, and so on. So now if I run this, it gives me j, which is the exact same thing. And you can see this is a much easier way to write than this, right? Similarly, if I want the second last character, I do sequence of minus 2, which gives I, right? So you've seen how to get a character at a certain position. So if we say fifth character, pick index value 4. If we say the 10th character, pick index value 9. If we say last character, you get it basically as the length of the string minus 1. Or you can also start negative indexing, which is using minus 1. So if you say string of minus 1, it gives you the last character of the string. If you say string of minus 2, it gives you the second last character of the string, right? So what we covered now is indexing, right? Now the next thing I'll teach you is, which I told you, is taking a like a section of the string. That's called subsetting or slicing. So if you have string of m to n in box brackets, m to n basically means start from index position m and go all the way to index position n minus 1, right? And it gives all those characters at those index positions. So let's look at the examples here. I'll just start uncommenting these one by one, right? Control /2, comment or uncomment. So the first thing we look at is I want the first two characters of the string, right? So I start with character 0, or rather the character at index position 0. Now when I say 2 here, I basically mean I want to start at 0 and end at 2 minus 1, which is 1. Right? So I'm getting the first two characters of the string by saying sequence of 0 to 2. So the character at index position 2 is not included. Only the characters at index position 0 and 1 are included. So it's basically from m to n minus 1. So if I run this, I get AB, which is the first two characters, right? So now if in cases where 0 is mentioned, you can just eliminate the 0 and Python understands that it means 0. Like in this case, if I leave the first part on the left side of this colon empty, it basically, Python understands that it means 0. It's so line 2 is basically the same as line 1 here. The output is the exact same. Sorry, I need to, yeah. Let's make that correction. Okay, so moving on to the third line here. Now let's say I want 3 characters from the string with indexes 5, 6, and 7. So basically I have to say sequence of 5 to 8, right? Because 8 is not included. It goes from 5 to 7 basically, index positions. So here there would be F, G, and H. Similarly, if I say I want everything except the first 3 characters, then I'm starting at index. So basically index positions 0, 1, and 2, I don't want. And starting from index position 3, I want everything to the end. So the way to write that is sequence of 3 colon and nothing after that. Because again, if you mention nothing, Python understands that it means end of the string. So if you mention nothing to the left of the colon, it means beginning of the string. If you mention nothing on the right side of the colon, it means end of the string. Let's run this. You can see that it's taken outside of the first 3 characters, it's taken everything else. So basically starting from the 4th character, which is D, all the way to the end, which is the 10th character, J. Now if I want to return the entire string using this subsetting, then I leave both the left and the right side of this colon empty. And you can see that we've got the whole string here. Okay, now moving on to a slightly more interesting thing. Let's say I want every second character in the string starting with the first character. So I have already shown you string of m colon n, which gives us characters m to n minus 1, and that's about it, right? And I showed you if you leave these two things empty, it gives you the whole string basically. Now you can specify a second colon, and what you specify to the right of that would basically, it's the third argument in this box bracket basically. It's the step, it's the jump, right? So every second or every third or every fourth, and you would specify 2, 3 or 4 accordingly. So in this case, I want every second character in the string starting with the first character. Since this is the first character, I don't need to mention anything here. Since I'm looking at the entire string, I don't need to mention anything after the first colon. And right at the end, in steps of 2, that is every second character. So let me run this now. Sorry. And you can see that I get A, which is the first character, then C, which is the third, E, which is the fifth, G, which is the seventh, and I, which is the ninth. And then the end of the string is encountered. And finally, I had shown you negative indexing to access like specific characters in the string, right? Now we can also like using a negative like a -1, we can reverse the string. So in the previous case, I used the positive number here to specify the jump, right? But if I specify -1, it basically reverses the string. Like Python understands that -1 is like a special value for this particular subsetting operation. So if I run it here, I get J to A in reverse order. Okay. So we've seen indexing, which is picking one character. We've seen subsetting, which is like a range of m, or let's say string of m to n would give you characters at index positions m to n minus 1 basically. Then we've also seen how to specify the third argument in here, which is the step. And if you specify -1, then it gives you the string in reverse. So we've covered indexing and we've covered subsetting or slicing. So let's do the exercises now. Declare a string S that has the value A to Z. Basically, it's the entire English alphabet and it should have a length of 26 because there are 26 alphabets, 26 letters. So let's say S equal to, and I'll just copy this and paste it here. So I've created that string, right? I've declared it. Now find the length of S. So I'm going to print len of S, okay? And remember, len is a built-in function, okay? It's not a property of the string object. So there are certain functions that you can, and we'll see those a little later in this tutorial. Certain functions you can access as string dot function, right? Or string dot method. But built-in methods are accessed directly without saying string dot method. So in this case, we just say len of string. Let's run it, control enter. We get 26, which is the length of the string. Now, what is the second character in the string? So I already told you, second character would mean character at index 1, right? So print s of 1. That's B. That's correct. What is the second from last character in the string? Now, instead of saying string of length of string minus 2, all I will do is I will use negative indexing and say string of minus 2. S in box brackets minus 2. Minus 1 would have given us the last character, minus 2 will give us the second last character. That's Y. Now print out the first 4 characters of the string. So I will say print S of first 4 characters means characters at index positions 0, 1, 2, 3, right? So basically S of 0 to 4 is how I would specify it, right? And just to make it more convenient, I can remove this 0 and make it like easier to write this code. And I get ABCD, which is the same value as before. Now print out the part of the string from the 7th character to the 11th character included. So what is the index position of the 7th character? It's 6. What is the index position of the 11th character? That's 10, right? But we want the 11th character included. So we'll specify the next character in our slicing operation. S of 6, which is the 7th character, to 12, right? And we say 12 because we want the index to go, sorry, we'll say 11, right? So this basically gives us the 7th character to the 11th character, that is index is 6 to 10. And when I say 6 to 11, it means that character at position 11 is not included. So GHIJK, which is 5 letters at the exact, that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay, so remember that clearly. If you want to go from the 7th to the 11th character included, then index wise you have to mention 7th to the 12th character, which is basically 6 to 11. Okay, now print out the entire string without the first 4 characters. So print S of, I'm starting with the 5th character, right, which is index position 4 and going all the way to the end, so I don't need to specify anything here. So when I say without the first 4 characters, I mean starting from the 5th character. And starts from E, as you can see. Print out every third character in the string. So I'll say print S of, and it says in the entire string basically. So I won't specify anything for these first 2 values. And the third value I'll specify as a step value, which is every third value, right? Every third character. So it starts with the first character A, then jumps BC, then it prints D, jumps E and F, then it prints G, and so on, right? And finally, print out the string reversed. So print S of, I won't specify the first 2 things because it's printing out the entire string reversed, and I'll say -1, right? So this should give us the entire string in reverse order. So this is basically the this is the reason why we included strings under Python collections. Okay, this is where we understood how to treat strings as a sequence and perform indexing and slicing operations. And this is really useful. For example, if let's say you get some ticket code from the airline, right? And let's say the first 3 characters are your the airport code of the source, right? And the next 3 characters are the code for the destination airport. So then you can extract the first 3 using indexing, or sorry, subsetting, and you can extract the next 3 using subsetting, and you can then find the actual value or where that airport is and so on, right? So subsetting, slicing, and indexing are really useful operations. Okay, so now we're going to get into methods to manipulate strings. Okay, so you remember I spoke about len, which is a built-in function, right? So a built-in function is independent of any particular object. So I say len of string, but all these other things are called methods, right? And a method is basically a property of an object. Not a property, but a method is accessed through its object, right? Like, so if I say there is a string called hello world, string that hello world string, which is a string object, has certain attributes and it has certain methods, right? And the methods basically enable us to do some processing on that object. So let's see what some of those methods are. I've basically put out a whole bunch of methods here. I'm pretty certain you'll find all of these useful at some point, but you should you should probably know that it's not vital for you to remember exactly what the name of the method is, what the default values of the arguments are, what order do those arguments come in. No, what I'm teaching you here is the concepts, right? To tell you what is possible so that then when you write code and you're writing hundreds of lines of code a day, there's no way for you to remember everything, but you have to be super efficient in how you use Google, right? So all of this is basically giving you the right amount of exposure so that then you can find the right stuff really fast on Google. So these two methods convert strings to upper and lower case respectively, right? So dot upper will convert this string to uppercase, which is basically capitalized text, and this method lower will convert this string entirely to lowercase. Like you can see that this T and this S are both caps, right? So that will also become lowercase. Let's try that now. We've already seen the len function. Let's try this now. So I'm just going to create a new cell. I used Alt Enter to basically run the current cell and create a new cell below it. I could have also just clicked on this cell and then said insert cell below. So let's now see what the output of lower and upper is. So lower basically converts this entire thing to lowercase. Upper converts this entire string to uppercase, right? So at the end of it, in the first example, there is not a single character that is capitalized. In the second example, there is not a single character that is not capitalized. Everything is in uppercase. So you've seen lower and upper, right? So there are lots of times where we need to do some string processing where like there might be some spaces at the beginning of a string, some spaces at the end of a string. Okay, I'm not considering how many spaces are in the middle of the string, only leading and trailing spaces. So the strip function is useful here, right? Now, I'll show you these four examples and I'll comment them and then uncomment one by one, right? So let me just, so if I say strip, it means strip both the left side and the right side. That is the beginning and the end of the string, right? So you can see that there are some spaces in the beginning, there are some spaces in the end. And if I apply dot strip, then it's removing both those things. Remember, it's not changing the original string, it's just returning a new string which has those spaces removed. So you can see that it's removed the leading spaces as well as the trailing spaces. Okay, so if I were to just show you that, I'll put three dots in the beginning also and then concatenate with this. So you can see three dots, no spaces, then this is a string. The spaces inside stay intact, and then you have three dots at the end. Similarly, uh, I can now strip removes both the left and the right side spaces, right? Now, if I wanted to remove only the left side, that is the leading spaces, then I could use L strip, basically saying left side needs to be stripped of spaces. So if I run this, you can see the left spaces have been removed, but the right space is intact. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing but I'm going to remove the spaces on the right side and keep the ones on the left intact. So for that, I'll use R strip. Okay. So here you can see that the spaces on the left are intact, but the space on the right has been removed. I put these three dots to basically show you that there is either a space present or not present. Now, so far what we looked at with the strip function was that by default it removes spaces, right? But it can also look for other characters, right? Like if there are repetitive characters at the end or the beginning, we can specify which character we want removed. Like if you look at this string here, there are multiple spaces on the left, right? And on the right, there are many different, repetitions of the letter G. So if I were to say I want to remove all the G letters on the right side, I'll say R strip, and instead of leaving it empty like I did over here, I'll specify the letter G at the end, right? So now you can see that the left side stayed unaffected, but the right side, all the G characters, ending G characters were removed. So this is how the strip function works. So you can strip out the spaces on both sides, or you can strip out only the left side using L strip, or the right side using R strip, or you can even specify which are the characters to be removed by passing an argument to this method. Okay, now let's move on to the next thing, which is split, right? So the split function, as the name suggests, is used to split a string into multiple parts, right? And if I were to tell you, you know what, I have a string with 10 words, right? I have a sentence with 10 words as a string. I want you to give me the individual words, right? How would you split them? Obviously, what you would use as, let's say, the delimiter or the splitting character would be space, right? So you split a string or a sentence on space and you get the individual words in the sentence. So more often than not, we use space, but let's say in the case of a date, right? You can use either forward slash if the date is in a certain format, or you can use uh, the hyphen if the date is in this format. So let's see how this works now. The split function. So the first one is I'm just going to split this string uh, on space, right? So I have a sentence and I'm going to get the individual words because I'm going to split the string every time a space occurs. And what do I get as the output? I get a list of words which are part of the sentence. So you can see that I have a list, right? And we'll cover list immediately after string. But basically, I now have four strings. This is a string, which are four separate words, right? Now, over here, I have a date, 2020-02-25, which is 25th Feb 2020. And I want to split it on the hyphen character so that I get a list of three things, right? The leftmost thing in the list is the year, the middle one is the month, and the rightmost one is the date. So let me run that. And you can see I have this list with these three separate strings. Now, similarly, for the last thing, so I told you, right, like the split basically gives you a list of strings, right? And now, because it's a list, I can also use indexing to access specific elements in that list. Like, for example, if I wanted to just extract the year from this, the year is the first element in this list, right? And just as we saw in indexing for a string over here on top, we treated the string as a sequence and we did indexing, right? So we can do the same thing with lists. And if we have to get the first element of the list, all we do is 0 in box brackets. So splitting this string on hyphen will give us this list of three elements, and then indexing and saying element at index position 0 will give us the first one. So that's what the split function does. It splits a string on a certain character. Now, another variant of this is called split lines, right? Split lines, as the name suggests, you would have a longer piece of text, right? Let's say you have a paragraph, and now you want to get each sentence in the paragraph, right? Typically, lines are separated from each other. Like, how would you separate one line from another? You would press enter, right? So there's basically a new line character between lines. So if I had this kind of string, right? This is line 1 backslash n, which you saw as a special sequence for a new line character. And then we do a split lines. It splits the string on the new line character, right? And it gives you a list of sentences or a list of lines. So if I run that, you can see that I have a list of 3 lines. This is line 1, this is line 2, this is line 3, right? And they're all split on this new line character. So the split lines function is basically like saying, split this on this particular character. Backslash n, right? It should give me the same output. There we go. It's the exact same thing. So I just did this to indicate how the function behaves. Now let's look at the next thing, right? So if I have a list of lines from a much longer piece of text, then I can also pick out, using indexing, I can pick out a specific line. Let's say I want to pick out the second line. So using this, I got the entire list of lines. But if I want only the second line, then I would just add a 1. The line at index position 1, right? So that'll give me this. This is line 2, which is the second line, which is the line at index position 1. So that's how split lines works. So we've seen lower, upper, we've seen strip, L strip, R strip. We've seen how to split a string on a certain character. We've seen how to split lines. And now finally, we'll do the opposite of split, which is join, right? So let's say you have a list of strings, right? A list of words. This is the list of words, okay? It's called this is a string. Now let's say I want to join these words together. I have individual words and I want to form a single sentence. So how would you do that? I would like stitch these words together and separate them with a space, right? So what I would do is I would say print space dot join, and then I would provide this list of words, list of strings. And now you get this entire string reconstructed with space as the separator between the words. So you have a way to split words, or rather split a sentence into words by specifying what character you want to split on. Similarly, you also have a way to join individual words into a sentence by specifying how to join them. Like if instead of space I wanted to join them with a hyphen, I could have just pressed hyphen join split string. And here you have the result where the words are joined by hyphens. So let's do these exercises and you'll understand this a little better. So create a string variable with the value, this is a string. And there are lots of spaces on both the left and the right. S equal to, this is a string. Now find the length of the string. So I'll say print len of S. We have 24. Now print out the string in uppercase and lowercase. So I'll say print S dot upper, right? Now remember, this is a method. That's why I'm doing S dot method name. Now len is a built-in function. So I just typed len of S in that case. So S of upper will give us the uppercase string. Print S of lower will give us the lowercase string. Here we go. Now print out the string without the spaces at the beginning. So I've taught you the strip function. and I want to remove the leading spaces, that is at the beginning. So on the left side, so I'll do lstrip. So print s dot lstrip, and I'll run it. So you can see that there are no spaces here now. And if you just want to confirm that, you could just say plus lstrip. So basically no spaces. Now print out the string without any spaces at the beginning or end. So there's no L or R. I want everything removed. So I'll just use the strip function. Print s dot strip. Here we go. No spaces at the beginning or end. Now print out the individual words in the string without spaces, and you can chain functions together, right? So I had a whole bunch of spaces on the left and the right, right? And I want to get the individual words of the string. So what I will do is, first I will remove the spaces, and then from that reduced string without leading and trailing spaces, then I will split it on space, right? So how do I get the, I'll just show you this as a multi-stage operation, and then I'll do the whole thing at once. So stripped string equals, since I already have s in my namespace, I'll say s dot strip, right? So I've removed the uh, leading and trailing spaces. Now I want to split the sentence into words. So I'll say split string equals stripped string dot split, right? So I'm splitting it on space, and I'm taking the stripped version where the left and right leading and trailing spaces have already been removed. So now let me print that. So you have, this is a string, right? Which is exactly what we want. We have the individual words in a list. Now another way to do this is also, you can just like do everything at once. So print s dot, what is the first thing I'm doing? I'm stripping the spaces on the left and right. And then what am I doing? I'm splitting the word. So s dot strip dot split. It goes in this order, right? First is strip, then is split. And I'll get the same answer. Now join the individual words with hyphen instead of spaces, right? So I had this split string already, and I want to join them with hyphen instead of spaces. So I'll say print hyphen as a string dot join split underscore string, which is basically what I got over here, which is this string, this list, right? So now I have this as one single string, but where the words are joined by hyphen instead of space. I specified hyphen here. Now I have to create this new string, and you can see that there are two new line characters, so basically 3 lines. And I want to get the second line of the string. So I'll say s equal to this string, right? And now I have 3 lines. So how am I going to get a list of lines? I'll do split lines, right? String dot split lines. And then from that list, I'll pick out the second line, which is the line at index position 1. So I'll say print s dot split lines, which will give me a list of all the lines. And then I say in box brackets 1 to give me the second line. So you can see that it gives you, this is line 2, which is basically the second line. So that brings us to the end of the first set of methods to manipulate strings. Okay. Now let's move on to a few other useful methods. So how do I check if a string uh, contains some other characters or string or a substring sometimes, right? So I would use the find function. I would use the find function if I wanted to know the exact location of where that substring is located. But if I just wanted a true or false, then I would just use the in keyword, right? So these are two ways of finding out if a substring is present in a bigger string. And again, these are methods. So remember, it'll be a string dot find. So for example, here you have this is a string and you want to find string, right? Important thing to remember, this is all these functions are case sensitive. Okay, so there's a difference between string with capital S and small s. So let me just show you these two things. I'm going to insert a new cell below this. So I'll run just the first one, right? So where do you think, firstly, do you think this exists? This string, does it exist in this string? I think it does, right? Because this is exactly this. The S also matches. So what does it return? It returns the index of the first occurrence of this string within this string. So basically the index of this S, right? That's what it returns. So that's position number, index position 10, which is the 11th character of the string. So if I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 characters already done, and the 11th character is where this substring starts, right? And 11th character has index 10. So that's what it returns. So the find function returns the index of the first occurrence of this string. Now I could also say that string, it could be multiple times, but it'll return the same answer because it returns the index of the first occurrence. Now let's look at another example where I search for string with a small s instead of big S, right? And in this case, it does not find it. So it returns -1. -1 is basically the output of the find method when it does not find the substring within the larger string. Cool. So we looked at find in cases where we wanted the position of that substring. But let's just say we want to know, does it exist or not in that bigger string? In that case, we would use in, right? In is like find, where if the return value is 0 or more, it returns true. If the return value is -1, it returns false. That's basically what in does. So substring in string, that's how you write it. Okay. Now the substring here is contained in this, right? It is case sensitive. So the answer should be true. But if I were to change this to small s, then the answer is false because it's not present in the bigger string. So that's how in works. Now, just like in Excel, right? Like you have find and the counterpart of find is replace. That is, okay, I found something where this exists. What do I do with it? I'll replace it with something else. Like let's look at the first sentence here. Bangalore has good weather. Bangalore is in South India. And now Bangalore was renamed to Bengaluru some years back. So let's say I want to replace Bangalore with Bengaluru, right? So I say string, which is this string, dot replace Bangalore, which is the old value, with Bengaluru, which is the new value. Like another way to do this would be I say s equal to this string, right? And then print s dot replace Bangalore with Bengaluru. So now you can see in the output, all instances of Bangalore have been replaced by Bengaluru. Now let's look at another case, right? Where I don't want all instances replaced. I just want one instance replaced, right? So then I say this is the value I want replaced. This is the value I want to replace it with. And this, the third argument here, is the number of instances I want replaced. So it starts with the first instance and then replaces how many ever you specify. So here you can see the first instance has been replaced, but the second instance is as is untouched. Okay. So that's how the replace function works. Now count, as the name suggests, will tell you like how many instances of the substring are there in the bigger string. So again, it's case sensitive. So H with capital, hello with capital H is present in this bigger string only once, right? And hello with small h is present in this bigger string twice, once here and once here. So the first sentence, or rather the first operation, should yield the value 1, and the second operation with count should yield the value 2, which is exactly what we get. So string dot count of substring. That's the format, right? And now let's look at a couple of ways of like making strings more dynamic, right? So one way is to use the format function, format method, and the other way is to use f strings. So let's show you this now, right? Okay, so let me actually give you another example before this. So say print, hello, Mr. Kapoor, welcome to Mumbai, right? Okay, so this is a message that you would show for a person called Mr. Kapoor if he were landing in Mumbai, right? Now, what happens if you want to change this statement to make it more dynamic, right? Like, let's say Mr. Kapoor could be any other person, right? And let's say, uh, let's actually just remove this and say, hello, Varun, welcome to Mumbai, right? So, because then I would have to figure out if it's a male passenger or a female passenger and then put the Mr. or Mrs. accordingly. So, let's say I have this hello Varun, welcome to Mumbai, but the problem here is it's static, right? Like I can't change it. I can't tell every passenger coming to Mumbai, hello Varun, welcome to Mumbai. I have to put their name, and if they happen to land in a different airport, I should put the name of that location, right? So I would basically want something like hello with a placeholder called name, welcome to location, right? So this is how I'd want it. Or I could also say uh, something like hello uh, first value, welcome to second value, right? So this is how I would write it. So the way to do this thing is, I'll just comment that for now. Hello, and I'll in curly brackets I'll say 0. That basically means the argument given to format, the format method, at position index position 0, that is the first argument, welcome to this, and this is basically refers to the argument at index position 1, which is the second argument, right? And then you have to do dot format and give these two arguments. So in the first one I would say Varun, and the second argument I would say Mumbai, right? So this is argument at position 0, which gets replaced here. This is argument at index position 1, which gets replaced here. So now if I run it, I basically get the same output, which is what I wanted, right? So this is one way of making a string more dynamic. In this case, I'm passing positional arguments to the format method, right? So you have a string dot format, and whatever arguments you pass to this format method, you include the positions, the index positions of those arguments inside the string in curly brackets, right? So if I wanted, let's say there's another person called Shreya, right? All I need to do in this case is I would just copy the same thing above and just change the arguments. The string stays the same. And let's say this is person who's landing in Delhi, right? So if I run this, I get this new string with hello Shreya, welcome to Delhi, right? So this is how you make a string dynamic. Now another way to do this would be instead of passing like positional arguments, because sometimes a person might forget, like, do I pass location and name or name and location? Like, which order do I pass it in, right? So a better way would be to specify the name of the variable, which is something that we would do here, right? Hello name, welcome to location. So in this case, what I would do is I would copy the same format function, place it down here. Instead of 0, I'll say name. Instead of 1, I'll say location. And I will just name these arguments in the format method. So name equals Shreya, location equals Delhi, right? So the, what I'm saying here is in this string, replace this argument called name in curly brackets with this value and replace this argument called location in curly brackets with this value. That's what I'm telling Python to do using the format function for this string. Okay. If I run this is the same output I get. But in this case, I'm using positional arguments. In this case, I'm using named arguments, right? And this is still okay, but there's a better way to do this. It's by using variables directly. Now, let's say I have a variable called name somewhere in my program, right? Let's say it's called Vikram and location equals Bangalore, right? So now I don't even need to do a dot format or whatever. I can just, I'll remove this part, the last part. So all I have is the string, right? And before that, I'm just typing in the letter F. So this is called an F string. So it's hello, Mr. Name, and name is taken from a variable in the program, which has been defined before the string. And in this case, the value of that variable called name is Vikram. And Vikram is what gets put over here. And similarly, there's a variable called place. And I'm going to replace this with place. And it gets replaced with the value Bangalore in the string. So if I print it now, hello, Mr. Vikram, we will land in Bangalore in 2 hours, right? So this is how you use string.format and f strings to format strings and make them more dynamic. So we've seen find, we've seen in. Find basically gives you the index of the first occurrence of the substring in the string. In just tells you true or false whether the substring is present in the string or not. Replace replaces all or some instances of the substring in the string with another substring. Count tells you the number of instances that are there. Format basically replaces some placeholder in the string with some other value. And f string also lets you embed variables inside a string. Okay, so let's do some exercises now. Find the position of the string this. So I'm going to say substring equals this. And the string equals this, right? So I want to find the position of this within this. How do I do that? Print string dot, actually it's confusing. So let me just call this S, right? So S dot find, and it's asking me for position, not just whether it exists or not. So I'm going to use the find function, substring, and enter. So it's -1, right? So this particular substring is not present in the string. It might look like it is, but it's actually not, because the find function is case sensitive. So now I want to change the substring to this with capital T, right? Now if I search for it, I will find it, and I will find it in the first position. So the index should be 0. Here we go. The index is 0. That means it's found it, and the first instance happens at position, index position 0. So obviously this proves that the find function is case sensitive, because we tried with this with small t and this with capital T. Now I need to check if this string contains the substring 2020, right? And I want a true false answer. So I don't need to use find, I can use in. So I don't need to create new variables each time. I can just say print 2020 in this string. Say enter, and it's true because it finds it here, right? And if I search for 2021, for example, it would find it false because it does not exist here. Now it's true. Now use the replace function to replace all instances of Bombay to Mumbai in this sentence. Remember, the original string is not being changed here. Python is just returning a new string with the old value replaced with the new value. Okay, so I'm going to say print. This is the original string, and I want to replace. So I'm going to say dot replace. That's the method, and I'm going to say the old value is Bombay, and the new value is Mumbai. I'm going to say enter. So you can see both instances here, Bombay has been replaced with Mumbai, right? Now let's say I want to replace only one instance. So I'll paste the same thing, but I'll pass a third argument to the replace method, which is 1, where I'm saying I only want to replace one instance. Let me run this. So you can see that the first instance has been replaced, but the second instance is untouched. And is replace case sensitive? I'm pasting it again, and I'm changing this capital B to small b, capital M to small m, and I'm going to run it. And the sentence, the input string is basically untouched, which basically means it's not found this lowercase Bombay, which means that the replace function is case sensitive. Okay, moving on. How many instances of hello are there in this string, right? Now I'm looking at number of instances. So logically, what function, what method am I looking at? I'm looking at the count method, right? So string dot count. So print hello 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 dot count, and what am I looking for? Capital, this one, hello with a capital H. There's only one, right? That's this one. The other two have small h. So let's search for that now, and that should give us 2, right? The small h. So there's one hello with a capital H and two hellos with a small h, as shown over here, and we can see that in the string. Now ask a user to enter his or her name and profession, then insert those details in the following message. We would like to welcome dash, that is the name, who is a dash by profession, to our event, right? So how would we do this? Now I've shown you the format function and I've also shown you the f string, right? So we'll use both these one by one. First order of business is getting the person's name and profession, right? So I'm going to say name equals input. So I'm asking the user for input and saying, what is your name? So the user inputs that. Then I go to the next thing, right? Profession equals input. What is your profession? Now he'll input that also. And then you have name and profession stored in these variables, right? Now I want to print out some string, some message. This is the message I would like to print out, right? And this gets replaced by name. So what I'll do is I'll say name. This gets replaced by profession. Or just for the sake of clarity, let me say nm here, nm instead of name, and prof instead of profession, right? So I'm going to pass that, I'm going to run the format method on that string, and I'm going to pass nm equals name and prof equals, I know this looks a little confusing, but just consider it, okay? I'm saying there is a placeholder called nm, right? Which should contain the name. And here in the format method, I'm saying the placeholder nm has the value name, which is what we asked this person over here. The placeholder prof has the value profession, which is what we asked the user here, right? And I'm just replacing these two placeholders with the actual values. So let's run it and see what happens. It asks, what is your name? I say Vikram. What is your profession? I say teacher. So then it prints out the message. We would like to welcome Vikram, who is a teacher by profession, to our event, right? So this placeholder got replaced by what I input first. This placeholder got replaced by what I input second. Now, another way to do this would be using f strings, right? Where instead of saying there's a placeholder, then here's the placeholder value, I'll just say f and have this string here and directly embed the variable names inside. So I can just say the first place, this is the variable name. Second case, this is the variable name. These variables have been defined here already. There's no dot format, there's no nothing. I'm just saying f over here. It's an f string. See, so I can see I've got the same output from both these things, but this one was much easier to write and much more intuitive, right? So my suggestion is, I mean, f strings were obviously introduced a little later, and it's a best practice to use these now. So we've seen a second set of methods by which we manipulate strings. We've seen find, replace, in, count, f strings, and format. Now there's a final set of methods. They're really easy, don't worry. And remember, the point is not for you to be a perfectionist and get everything right in the first go. It's just for you to know that, hey, these things are possible with strings, so I know exactly what to search for. Now, finally, I might want to perform some checks on my data, right? Like, for example, if I ask a person to enter their first name, there should only be letters, right? There should be no spaces, special characters, numbers, nothing of that sort. Or if I ask a person to enter their bank account number, or let's say I want them to enter their, what else would have, employee ID, for example, that contains only numbers, right? And I don't want it to contain anything like space or special characters or even letters. So how do I check for this? Like, how do I do validations? So sometimes I might get a string value. Let's say a person submits a form online and I want to perform some validation on that, right? So I need to check if the value that the user has entered for first name is purely alphabetical, right? And contains nothing else. Or I need to check if the bank account they've specified is purely numeric and nothing else. Or if I say that their flight ticket code is purely alphanumeric and nothing else, right? So I would use some string methods to do this. So is alpha tells me if this string is purely alphabetical. And by that I mean A to Z, uppercase, lowercase, and nothing else, not space, not number, not special character. Is numeric, as the name suggests, will tell me if this string has only numbers, no spaces, no letters, no special characters. And is alnum will say, is this string alphanumeric? That is, does it contain only alphabets and numbers? Right? And finally, there are two methods called starts with and ends with, where you can check if the leftmost part of a string matches with what you've supplied. That's what starts with. And the rightmost part matches with what you supplied, which is ends with. Okay, so we'll look at exercises for these now. So how does the function isAlpha treat the input Python programming? So what do you think is going to happen here? Print Python programming dot is alpha, right? So I would argue that it's not purely alphabetical because there is a space. So is alpha should return false, and that's what it does. And if I were to remove this space, then it returns true. How does the function isNumeric treat the input 1, 2, 3, 4 space? Is numeric. So again, I would argue that there is a space, so it's not perfectly numeric. So is numeric should return false. That's correct. And if I remove the space, it'll return true. And over here, I missed out this part. What about A, B, C, D, E, F? Obviously, there is no space and it contains only letters. So it should return true. Is alpha, right? And that's true. It returns true. How does the function isAlnum treat the input ABC 1234 dollar? So string dot isAlnum, again there is a special character, so it's not purely alphanumeric, right? There is something outside of alphabets and numbers, so it should return false. Now if I remove this dollar sign, it will return true because there are only alphabets and numbers now. So isAlnum is true. Now there is this string here which is, let's say, a flight ticket code or something. I need to check if it starts with BLR, right? The string, the substring BLR. And it's true because the first three letters are BLR. Now I also need to check if the same thing ends with hold, which seems to be the status, right? The status of the ticket. And it's not on hold, it actually ends with conf, right? So this should return false. There we go. So in this set of methods, we saw how to check if a string is alphabetical or numeric or alphanumeric, or whether it starts with a certain string or ends with a certain string, right? So that brings us to the end of this gigantic section on strings. And it might seem too long, it might seem too tough. Don't worry, it's really easy. Just get the concepts right, okay? Concepts are, how do you initialize a string? Remember single quotes, remember double quotes, right? Remember when to use single, when to use double. And you also know how to initialize a multi-line string using triple quotes. Now you know about string escaping, where you use backslash to tell Python to treat certain characters in the string differently. Now you would escape a double quote with backslash, you would escape a backslash with backslash, you know of two special sequences called backslash n, which is a new line, and backslash t, which is a tab, right? From there, we move to simple operations on strings, like how to concatenate two strings using plus, how to repeat a string n times using the multiplication operator, how to convert an int to a string using the str function. Then we saw how to treat strings as a sequence, right? Like we know it's a collection, but it's also a sequence where things are in order. We saw that for a string of length n, the index runs from 0 to n minus 1. We saw how to pick out characters at specific locations using indexing. We saw how to pick out like chunks of characters using subsetting or slicing. We saw how to take like every second element, every third element. We saw what negative indexing was. We saw how to get the string in reverse, right? And then we looked at a whole bunch of methods to manipulate strings. And they're really important. Like the idea is not to mug those methods. The idea is to know that they exist and to be smart about what you search for. So we saw how to get the length of a string. We saw how to like search for specific information within the string, right? Like uh, find, replace, in, starts with, ends with. We saw how to convert a string to uppercase, lowercase, remove spaces using strip, split a string into words using split, uh, split a paragraph into lines using split lines, then how to join multiple words in a list together to form a string using join. Then also check if the alpha numeric, and you know whether it starts with and ends with certain things. So we've covered a whole bunch of ground right now. I'm proud of you for sticking it through. If you have any doubts, please get in touch with me. The email ID is published on our website. So it's missionai.org@gmail.com. Our website is missionai.org. So please like this video, subscribe to us, and let me know your feedback, and I'll see you in the next video.